In the dim hush between forgotten centuries, there are whispers of a manuscript so heavy with sorrow that those who dared to read it claimed the air itself grew colder around them, and tonight you and I will walk through the shadows of that very chronicle tracing, the contours of a tragedy carved into time like a scar that refuses to fade. Welcome to the Unveiled Scroll, dear Travala of Hidden Histories. And before we descend deeper into this forbidden tale, I invite you to like, subscribe, and share. For the story awaiting you is one that was never meant to be told. A story titled, The Forsaken Chronicle that unveils a cataclysm buried in silent centuries. Let us begin where all doomed histories begin, with a man who believed he could outpace fate. His name was Alistair Harand, a historian whose hunger for truth far outstripped the caution that wiser men carried like a shield. Born into a modest family in the northern reaches of the old continent, Alistair possessed a gaze that seemed permanently fixed beyond the horizon, drawn toward mysteries untouched by ordinary scholars, while others chronicled wars, reigns, treaties, and triumphs. Alistair sought the absences to blank spaces in history where entire decades dissolved into silence with no explanation, and the most haunting of these voids centered around the year 1347, where, according to carefully preserved archives, nothing happened. No storms, no plagues, no wars, no births of kings or deaths of tyrants. It was as though a single year had been scrubbed clean, not forgotten, but intentionally erased. That omission became the first thread of the labyrinth Alistair would eventually lose himself in. His descent began the moment he found the reference to a place called Edinsfall, a settlement never mentioned in any official records, yet repeatedly alluded to in the private letters of nobles, merchants, and clergy who lived during that silent year. They spoke of it as if it were a place of great importance, yet always with a tone of fear, as though simply writing its name risked summoning something better left undisturbed. Determined to uncover the truth, Alistair traveled to the ruins said to lie deep within a forest avoided 4 generations by locals who muttered tales of vanishing travelers and strange lights flickering beneath the earth. Upon entering the forest, Alistair noted that the birds did not sing, and even the wind seemed reluctant to stir the branches overhead. Every sound was muffled, swallowed by an atmosphere too dense to be natural. He pressed on for hours until he reached a clearing dominated by the remnants of what appeared to be a vast stone circle. Its monoliths were immense, each etched with symbols that defied linguistic shapes that twisted the mind the longer one stared at them. At the center of the circle lay a slab of obsidian so polished it reflected the sky above with unnatural clarity. It was atop this stone that Alistair discovered the book, the Chronicle of Ed. Its cover was bound in something that felt neither like leather nor cloth, but instead something cold, smooth, and unsettlingly organic. The pages appeared to shimmer even in the absence of light, as though illuminated from within by memories desperate to be heard. When Alistair opened it for the first time, he felt the world around him shift, as if he were no longer standing in the present, but balanced precariously between now and a ghost of the past. The chronicle began with an account written by a scribe named Lorien Vale, a man whose eloquence barely masked the terror lacing each sentence. Lorien wrote of Edinsfall as a place built upon a covenant with the earth itself, a settlement forged by a council of scholars, artisans, and mystics who believed they could harness the unseen forces that threaded through creation. They sought enlightenment, harmony, and a deeper understanding of existence. But in their ambition, they reached too far. According to Lorien, the council discovered a fissure beneath the stone circle, a tear in the natural order where time pooled like a liquid, thick with the weight of everything forgotten. They called it the Vein of Echoes, a source of limitless knowledge, for therein dwelled reflections of events that had not yet occurred and memories of realities that never came to pass. Edinsfall prospered for years as its council drew from the vein, elevating their settlement into a kind of utopia. But each revelation extracted a cost, subtle at first, then catastrophic. Children were born with eyes, the color of storm clouds, seeing visions that did not belong to them. Shadows moved independently of their owners, writhing across the ground like wounded things. And worst of all, the people began to forget themselves. Names slipped from memory, faces blurred, entire lifetimes dissolved into mist. Yet the council pressed on, blinded by the brilliance of the secrets they wielded, unaware that the vein was not a gift, but a wound, and the more they drew from it, the more the wound widened. As Alistair turned the pages, he felt a coldness coil around his spine, for Lorien's words carried not just fear but apology, as though he were confessing to a crime too vast to comprehend. The Chronicle spoke of the night when the vein ruptured, unleashing a tide of Untima phenomena Lorien described as moments unstitching themselves, past and future, colliding in a violent cascade that tore Edensfall from history. The villagers were swallowed not by death, but by erasure, becoming echoes trapped between the folds of reality. That was why the year 1347 contained no recorded events, not because nothing happened, but because something happened that consumed everything around it. Alistair felt an ache in his chest as he read, a sensation Lorien had warned about. The Chronicle was not meant to be read by the unprepared. Its knowledge clung to the mind, burrowing deeper with each revelation. Still, Alistair could not stop. He needed to know what became of Lorien, of the Council, of Edensfall itself. And as he delved into the final pages of the first section, he realized the Chronicle was no mere document. It was a survivor, and it was beginning to remember him. Alistair felt a faint tremor through his fingertips, a vibration that seemed to pulse from the Chronicle itself, subtle yet deliberate, as though the book were breathing beneath his hands. He steadied himself, drawing a slow breath, and continued reading, even as the forest around him grew eerily still, as if the hollowwood were leaning in to listen. Lorien's writing shifted in tone as the Chronicle progressed, the earlier eloquence giving way to hurried script, each line appearing more desperate than the last. He spoke of visions that plagued him, glimpses of a future in which Edensfall existed only as a rumor whispered by wind, a memory too faint to be called a ghost. He described standing in the stone circle on the eve of the rupture, watching the monoliths pulse with a dim, sickly glow, each symbol warping like a living wound. The council gathered around the vein of echoes, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes clouded by sleepless nights spent chasing fragments of forbidden truths. The leader of the council, Master Saradin, believed they were on the cusp of the greatest enlightenment humanity had ever known. He claimed the vein was not a danger, but a conduit, a bridge to a higher order of existence. Lorien, however, sensed something terribly wrong. He wrote that the vein had begun whispering, at first faintly, then incessantly, like a chorus of forgotten voices pleading to be released. These voices did not sound divine. They sounded broken. Alistair could almost hear them in his mind as he read, a faint echo brushing the edges of his thoughts. He shook his head, but the sensation lingered, like a memory that was not his own. Lorien described how the council, blind to the looming doom, attempted to widen the vein, to peel back its edges and expose the full breadth of its secrets. They believed that by expanding the rift, they would gain mastery over time itself, transcending mortality and reshaping history with their newfound knowledge. But the vein had grown unstable, its shimmering depths flickering between countless realities, each more fractured than the last. On the night of the ritual, the air trembled with a low hum that resonated through every stone in Eden. The villagers gathered at the edge of the circle, drawn by curiosity and dread, their faces illuminated by the eerie light spilling from the fissure. Children wept without knowing why. Elders clutched their chests, feeling memories slip away like grains of sand through trembling fingers. Even the wind refused to blow, as though nature itself held its breath. Master Saradin raised his arms, chanting the forbidden incantation he claimed the vein had taught him. The council joined in, their voices merging into a rhythmic drone that reverberated across the settlement. Lorien stood apart from them, watching helplessly, knowing that the path they had chosen could not be undone. He wrote that he felt the ground beneath his feet ripple, as if the earth were trying to recoil from the rift. Then came the moment. Everything changed. The vein flared open with a blinding burst of pale light, and the hum became a scream, a piercing wail that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The monoliths cracked, shards of stone lifting into the air as though gravity itself had forgotten its purpose. Time convulsed. Lorien described seeing multiple versions of Edensfall flicker in and out of existence around him, some thriving, some burning, some entirely deserted, each lasting only a heartbeat before dissolving. The villagers were caught in the crossfire of collapsing realities. A mother reached for her child only to watch her hand pass through him as he flickered into an echo of a future that would never be. Entire homes dissolved into mist, then reformed in grotesque distortions before shattering into strands of untime. Lorien felt his own memories unraveling, his past slipping away as though pulled by invisible hands. He clung to the Chronicle, pouring his final coherent thoughts onto the page in the hope that anyone might one day understand the tragedy that befell them. And as he wrote of the moment Eden's fowl was swallowed whole, he described a sensation unlike anything mortal, the feeling of being unmade yet still aware, suspended in a realm where moments bled together without sequence or meaning. Eden's foal had not been destroyed, it had been displaced, cast adrift in the currents of untime. Alistair's breath shuddered as he reached the end of Lorien's account. But the Chronicle was not done. New text, written in a script eerily similar to Alistair's own handwriting, began to etch itself onto the page before his widening eyes. It addressed him by name. Alistair Heron, seeker of forgotten truths. The Chronicle remembers you. It has waited for you. The letters pulsed faintly, as though alive, and Alistair staggered back, nearly dropping the book. The forest seemed to close in around him, the shadows deepening, the air thick with an unseen presence. The Chronicle continued to write, the words forming slowly, deliberately, as if guided by a hand beyond the veil of reality. You've opened the path once more. The vein stirs, and the untime has found you. Alistair felt a cold touch brush the back of his neck, and he spun around. But there was nothing there, only the silent forest and the distant echo of something shifting, something ancient, something remembering. Alistair stood frozen, the Chronicle trembling in his hands like a living pulse, its pages fluttering though no wind stirred the clearing. He felt the weight of countless unseen eyes pressing against him, their gaze as cold as winter graves. The words freshly etched onto the glowing parchment seemed to throb with a low hum he could feel in his bones, a resonance older than language, older than the boundaries of time itself. Then, slowly, the ink shifted again, forming a new message, its meaning sinking into Alistair's mind like a stone sinking into a black lake. You cannot flee what remembers you. The moment he read it, the forest answered. A faint shimmer rippled through the air, like heat haze, but colder, sharper, bending the world as though reality were a curtain being pulled aside. Alistair gasped as the trees around him flickered not, vanishing, but doubling, tripling, forming ghostly after-images of themselves, layered like reflections in broken glass. The world stuttered, the clearing fracturing into overlapping versions of itself. He could see the stone circle in its ancient majesty, freshly carved and gleaming. He could see it shattered during the rupture. He could see it overgrown, forgotten, swallowed by centuries. All at once, all superimposed, all wrong. The vein of echoes was awakening. A chill swept through him, and when he looked down, he saw his shadow stretching unnaturally far across the ground, thinning, splitting, branching like a tree of night. One of the shadow branches twitched and curled back toward him, as though aware. The Chronicle pulsed. Harder. Alistair gripped it with shaking hands, his breath ragged, his thoughts spinning. He felt his memories warp at the edges, weeks dissolving into days, days into hours, and once familiar faces blurring into silhouettes. He clamped his jaw shut and steadied his mind, fighting against the pull of untime. He forced himself to read the next lines forming on the page. Lorien's voice again, but different, calmer, older, resonant with the weight of someone who had seen too much to fear anything mortal. If you read this, you stand at the threshold as we once did. The vein calls to those who seek truth, but truth is a blade that cuts the seeker deepest. Leave now, while the path of returning remains. But Alistair could not leave. The Chronicle sensed it, perhaps had known it from the start. The ink bled and coiled into more words, sharper now, almost mocking. You've followed our echoes. Now you must face our fate. The clearing shook violently. A vertical fissure tore open above the obsidian slab, glowing with pale, swirling light to tear in reality itself. Alistair saw within it fragments of Eden's fall drifting like debris in a cosmic tide. Children frozen mid-laughter, council members suspended in collapse, Lorien clutching the Chronicle with haunted eyes that seemed to stare at Alistair across centuries. He felt himself being pulled forward. His boots slid across the ground as though the earth itself wanted to hand him over to the abyss. He roared and dug his heels in. But untime was merciless. From the fissure came a sound not a voice, but a multitude of almost voices, half-formed, unfinished, Like memories trying to speak, they whispered his name, each pronunciation slightly different, as though spoken by versions of himself that never lived. Alistair, Harand, Alistair, Haran, Alice, Harold, Harold, Harold. The chorus overlapped, rising into a dissonant wave that nearly split his mind. Desperation surged through him. He clutched the Chronicle to his chest and shouted into the rift. "What do you want from me?" The fisher responded with a single, devastating truth. "We want to return." The force that ripped at him doubled, and Alistair stumbled closer. He knew the meaning instantly. The remnants of Edensfall, trapped between times, yearned for an anchor, a doorway, someone who could connect them back to the world they had lost. And Alistair, through his obsession, his curiosity, his relentless pursuit of forbidden knowledge, had become that doorway. The Chronicle flared brightly, its pages flipping wildly on their own until they settled on a blank sheet. New ink poured across it, forming a final message. The vein chooses its keeper. The Chronicle chooses its bearer, and time chooses its sacrifice. Alistair screamed as the fisher's pull became irresistible. His body dragged toward the rift, his mind fractured into 1,000 splinters, each reflecting a different version of himself, some reaching for the book, some dropping it, some running, some kneeling, some whispering pleas to gods long dead. Only one version, the one in this moment, had a choice. With every last ounce of his will, he hurled the Chronicle away from him. The moment it left his hands, the pull weakened. The fisher wavered, flickered, shrieked in a chorus of dying tongues. Alistair collapsed to the ground, gasping, nails digging into the dirt. The Chronicle landed at the edge of the clearing, its glow fading to a faint, fading heartbeat. The fisher twisted violently, contracting, folding in on itself like a collapsing star. Before it sealed completely, Alistair glimpsed Lorien one final time, face solemn, eyes full of a sorrow that transcended centuries. Then the rift snapped shut with a thunderous crack. Silence fell. The forest exhaled. The world settled. Alistair lay trembling on the cold earth, alive but irrevocably changed. His memories felt thin, fragile, like worn parchment, ready to tear. He staggered to his feet, stumbled to the Chronicle, and picked it up. It was inert now, cold as a stone, its pages blank. Whatever consciousness had dwelled within it was dormant or simply gone. But Alistair knew the truth. Idinsfa still drifted in the currents of untime. And now it remembered him. He left the Hollowwood before dawn, the Chronicle clutched to his chest, its weight heavier than any burden he had ever known. As he crossed the edge of the forest, he felt a faint tremor pulse through the book, like a heartbeat awakening. He didn't look back. And so, dear traveler of shadowed histories, we close today's tale with a warning carried from forgotten centuries. Some truths are not lost. They are waiting, and some doors, once opened, never close completely. Thank you for walking this dark path with me on the Unveiled Scroll. If this journey stirred your curiosity, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe. And when you're ready to explore more unseen chapters of hidden pasts, another tale awaits you on our channel. Until then, keep your lantern lit, for the shadows remember.